Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the Uncanny X-Men number 314, cover dated July 1994. So the cover caption here, early frost, and the focus is on Iceman, except this is Iceman's body but possessed by the mind of Emma Frost. That happened in the previous couple of issues, and in the cliffhanger at the end of the previous issue, Emma woke up in the body of Iceman and determined to escape from the X-Mansion. So the cover here is by Lee Weeks. I'll wager this is coloured by Steve Buccellato. Let's open this one up to the splash page. So we have Iceman Emma here, somersaulting backwards with a full moon behind her. Looks pretty cool, and the narrative captions indicate she sees the stars with eyes that are not her own. She can hear the pounding of a heart, feel it pounding in a chest that belongs to someone else. At long last, she can taste the night. She doesn't care that it is with someone else's tongue. After many months knowing nothing more than the frozen, unyielding embrace of a coma, Emma Frost is free. So she's been in that coma since issue 281, when she was attacked and her Hellions by Trevor Fitzroy and some Sentinels as well. So here we go. So she is escaping to New York down the Hudson River from Westchester, and in hot pursuit is Archangel and Storm, and they're having to take care because, of course, it's Bobby Drake's Iceman's body. So Archangel says here, "Don't make me do this, Emma. Don't force me to injure the body of my best friend just because you refuse to listen to reason." And she drops into the Hudson River, and she escapes before Aurora can tell her that the Hellions that she's going in search of are dead. So Archangel doesn't like the looks of it at all, and here we get this great effect, digital effect. So Steve Buccellato using digital coloring here. We haven't got to the credits yet, but we're getting there soon. And you can see the use made here, the whole of the Hudson River frozen over. And Storm concludes, White Queen is out there somewhere with all the power of the Iceman at her command. So let's see, a splash page here, and we get our credits. The story title is Early Frost. That's the caption on the cover too. Creative team, Scott Lobdell writer, Lee Weeks guest penciler, and Bill Sienkiewicz guest inker. So we're seeing a very particular treatment of Lee Weeks' pencils here, very different from how Klaus Janson treated his pencils on the Gambit miniseries. And I'll make some comments on Sienkiewicz's style as we go through the issue. Chris Eliopoulos, letterer, Steve Buccellato, colorist. There you go. So Emma here is determined to get to Manhattan and find out what really happened to the Hellions, who were her young charges when she was head of her Massachusetts Academy, and sometimes sparred with, in particular, the New Mutants. So Professor X makes contact with Archangel and Storm, tells them not to pursue Emma because he knows he has a fairly clear idea where she's heading. Great shot of the Blackbird here. And aboard the Blackbird with him is Banshee, and Banshee's a little bit skeptical of going after Emma, just themselves. Emma Frost was never what I'd consider the most stable of lassies if there's to be a confrontation, but Professor X says, make no mistake, old friend, there will be one, although I doubt it will be between the White Queen and us. Rather, Miss Frost will have to deal with a power far greater than her own, the power of the truth, because she's going to find out what happened to the Hellions. So here we go. This little panel here with the inking on Professor X's face, the Lee Weeks pencils. This is distinctive of Bill Sienkiewicz. And one thing about Sienkiewicz is that he inks fast. So he inks with a bunch of different tools, dip pens, as well as brushes, and he inks fast, and I'd say it was a lot of fun working on this. Also Bishop's back muscles here, and rendering the lines of his delineating his cheekbones here in this panel. So Sienkiewicz, a fast inker, and probably that might have been a reason why he was hired to go over Weeks' pencils. His style does complement Weeks, but I think that a smoother inker might look a bit better on this particular book, on Uncanny X-Men. If he was inking Weeks on Daredevil, let's say, or Ghost Rider or Punisher, I think it would be more appropriate. Here on X-Men, I think readers have come to expect slick inking from the likes of Dan Green, for example. But as I say, I reckon this they handed it over to Sienkiewicz because they needed speed, and Sienkiewicz is a speedy inker. So we switch to the Danger Room, and Bishop is in the midst of a training sequence, facing off against this holographic projection of a robot, and he's in dialogue with somebody at the same time, and whoops, that will be revealed who that person is shortly. And the person is a bit snarky in their dialogue with Bishop. Who could it be? Let's continue. So he gets the better of the robot, and then it turns out to be Shard. And who is Shard? Well, we're going to discover that in the course of these pages. So she isn't real, she's a hologram too. And she explains her creation. I know everything you painstakingly programmed me to know. I know that when I was your commanding officer in the XSC, none of us had the luxury of training. Each day on the muta-centric peacekeeping force was in and of itself an exercise in survival. So, Shard, the holographic projection of her, asks Bishop, is it a crime to miss me? Do you miss me? No. More than life itself, he says. Good, because and then she stopped short, and Bishop wonders what's happened. Is there a bug in the programming? But no, someone else has entered the Danger Room, and it turns out to be Jubilee. And we get an explanation of why what happened. The holo program automatically goes into freeze mode when the room fills with those unauthorized minors, you know? Excuse me. So she asks, is she interrupting anything? And he says he was just finishing up, and she asks the obvious question, who's the babe? She was hardly a babe, says Bishop. At one time, she was the youngest mutant to attain the rank of field commander at the XSE. She was also my sister. Her name was Shard. So this is Bishop's sister. And Jubilee, of course, is curious because she says, you never told me you had a family. So you're going to introduce me or what? So Bishop starts the computer program up again. And then Shard, the holographic projection of her anyway, comes to life once again and sees Jubilee. Like, this is interesting. It's like a kind of a artificial intelligence program. I recognize you from the handful of holovids that survived in our era. You're Jubilation, the last X-Man. And that's something that Bishop has said before. Yeah, so I've heard that nobody wants to fill me in on how I got that tag. And Shard says, well, look, it's a mystery. The few details we had of this era were sketchy at best. So nobody knows why she's known as the last X-Man. Great work here by Lee Weeks on Bishop's anatomy, the chest and stomach muscles, and well inked by Sienkiewicz as well. So Jubilee asks Bishop then, why didn't you bring her back with you when you came back in time? Bishop stops the program, and she says, look, Randall and Malcolm came back, why not your sister? It's because she was dead, he says. So that quiets her a bit, and then he adds, I killed her. And Jubilee's got nothing to say to that. So that is a mystery, a backstory for another day to be fleshed out. Then we switch to Frost Enterprises, one of the hottest stocks on Wall Street. It's also housed in one of the tallest buildings on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, as well as one of the most heavily fortified. And outside is Emma in Iceman's body, and she's thinking about how she might get in. And she tries to transform into flesh form, but she doesn't know. Even though she's able to intuitively use Iceman's powers better than he did, she doesn't know how to switch back into flesh and blood form. And indeed, she almost injures herself doing so. And as she cries out in pain, she's spotted by some of the night watchmen, part of that heavy fortification of the building. So these two guys here in silhouette mostly come up behind her, and they recognize her as a mutant ice boy, says this guy here. And she turns around and tells them to back off. The only place she's going is into the building. This security guy here decides to let rip with his sidearm, and he blows a hole in her chest. But she says, fortunately for all of us, this body seems quite capable of adapting to any alteration to its form. You can only imagine the inconvenience it would have caused if, I say, shattered into a million pieces. So that's an interesting one for Iceman as well, that he might be able to survive in pure ice form a close range shot right through the chest. So Emma's had enough. She takes out the two security guards and she melts into water and crosses the street into the building in liquid form. So that's an interesting use of Iceman's powers. So she solidifies into ice in the lobby, takes out another security guard, and makes her way to the records room. And all along the way, she is thinking about the Hellions and her relationship to them and her feelings for them. And this is interesting here, what Lobdell writes for her in terms of her thinking and insight we get into her character. Face it, Emma, she thinks to herself, you're spoiled. You're not used to physical conflicts. Even long before the coma, I had other people deal with the hand-to-hand battles. For that matter, the whole reason I founded the Hellions was to help them. It's interesting the way that she won't acknowledge. She's resistant to acknowledging that she recruited and used them as personal protection to make her life easier. And what she settles on as part of her kind of defense of her ego is, it was all to help them. I did it all to help the children. And this is interesting too, because what's going on in this issue is we get a kind of the beginning of a redemption arc for Emma Frost, and all in the run up to the creation of the new X team, the Generation Next, which will ultimately be headed up. That school will be headed by Emma and Banshee. So then she gets into the records in the record room and discovers that the Hellions are dead, deceased, all of them. So how did it happen? Well, here we go. Double page spread here. Make sure this is, all on camera for you. So make sure you can see all of that. This is a really good couple of pages by Lee Weeks and Sienkiewicz. And again, you see Sienkiewicz having fun with the inking here. Inking with a brush, but cutting in white media for the explosion effects and the rest. And we see the computer informing Emma of what happened with Trevor Fitzroy, the events of Uncanny X-Men 281, the Sentinels, and the killing of all of the Hellions. So this breaks her emotionally, and she just says in a small voice, all of you, please forgive me because I know I never will. Great work on these pages. Okay, let's continue with the story. So as she's broken, the security team arrive crashing through the door of the records room. They pull their guns on her, and she tells them do it. So they get ready to kill her. She wants to die by way of paying for the death of the Hellions. But they're interrupted by the arrival of Professor X, who telepathically stops them from shooting Emma. And he says, it is clear she was seeking an extreme form of retribution, he says this to Banshee, for crimes committed by the upstart known as Fitzroy. And then he addresses Emma directly. What happened was a tragedy of the highest order, but you cannot kill yourself. Don't tell me what I can or cannot feel, Charles, or blame yourself what I cannot feel, Charles Xavier. You've no idea what it is I'm feeling or why. And he accepts it and apologizes. So then tell me in your own words. So she says, even though Fitzroy killed them, I'm the one who lined them up all as targets. I'm the one who spent years traveling the globe, finding the most impressionable of the young mutants. I'm the one who gathered the sheep for the slaughter. And Professor X responds by saying, the Hellions chose to follow you, just as the New Mutants cast their lot at first with me, and later with Cable as X-Force, but you... And she interrupts and says, I'm not talking about anyone else's decisions, anyone else's actions. I'm talking about my own. I never had access to Cerebro as you had, Charles. I scoured every square inch of the planet, used all the wealth and resources I'd accumulated over the years, following every lead, checking under every rock, searching for any child who showed even the most remote manifestation of a mutant power. When I did find them, one student at a time, I hid them. From you, from Magneto, from Project Wide Awake. I rearranged their brain engrams so that they could not be detected. Didn't it ever occur to you not once to question how I had gathered so many young mutants? I stacked the deck in my favour because I honestly believed that I had more to offer them. Don't you understand? She says to him. They would have been better off with you. They trusted me with their lives, yes, but it was a trust I didn't deserve. I failed where you succeeded, Charles Xavier. I failed, and they paid the price for that failure with their lives, as she slumps to her knees. So Professor X says nothing there. He just looks very grimly determined. And it is Banshee who steps forward. And he was so skeptical of her and her character, but he steps forward and says, give me your hand. We cannot afford this anymore. We cannot afford to keep fighting amongst ourselves. Together we can look forward right here, right now. We can start working to build a better world for the next generation of mutants, of humans, of all of us. So in this silent panel, she takes his hand and he lifts her up from the floor and takes her from the room. So there we go. Step one towards Generation X. And that leaves Professor X in the room with the mind-locked security team looking at the computer screen with the names of the code names of the deceased Hellions. And he says, never again will the blood of innocence be spilt in this insane conflict between races, between factions. Never again. Next issue, you wouldn't believe as if we told you. Well, they tell us over here. Next issue, Colossus, the Acolytes return to Avalon. So stay tuned for a future video review to find out what happens in Uncanny X-Men 315. Letters here have to do with issue 309. That was the backstory between Professor X and Amelia Vought. I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on Uncanny X-Men 314, the story of Emma Frost's first step on the road to redemption and becoming co-headmaster of Generation X. And if you enjoyed the video, please like it in YouTube, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.